Hi, this lesson is on recording investment transfers in the Uniform Accounting Network. Please open your handbook to page 52, Investment Transfers. Well, we've seen how to, in the maintenance section, we saw how to set up investments and how to edit the investment information. And I promised we'd talk about how to transfer money in and out of investments. So if we look at an overview, the investment transfer form is used for this purpose. An investment transfer either debits cash from the balance of a primary checking account and credits cash to the balance of an investment, or debits cash from the balance of an investment and credits cash to the balance of the primary checking account. And I'll leave it to you to read the rest of that. We have to keep in mind our pooled versus non-pooled investment setting. Depending on how we set up our investment, as pooled or non-pooled, that'll determine some of the options we have available to us when we record an investment transfer. Just like all the transactions mentioned at the beginning of the receipts lesson, you can backdate and forward date these transfers. You can forward date up to 30 days in advance and backdate within the current year if that is needed. All right, so let's take a look at the software. To get there, you go to Accounting, Transactions, Investment Transfer. Now, remember we set up under Accounting Maintenance our Hayes Bequest Fund. We have several other. We have Star Ohio investment. That's a multi-fund pooled investment. And then we've got a few. These two are pooled and these two are non-pooled. So if we look at Hayes Bequest again, we can see that that does not have the checkbox filled next to the multi-fund pooled checkbox. It's not filled in, so that means it's a non-pooled investment, and currently it has a zero balance. So we set that up. Now we have the receipt set up for this investment. In the last lesson, we also set up the non-expendable balance of $9,000 in that fund. We're going to look at the fund for Hayes Bequest. We can see that we do have a balance in the checking account right now because we receipted $10,000 into the primary checking account, and then we set a non-expendable balance of $9,000. So it makes sense if this is $9,000 restricted by law and we cannot spend that money, that we might as well put it into an investment that has a better interest rate than our primary checking account. So that's what we're going to do under Transactions, Investment Transfer. And this form, as you can see, is a separate pop-up window. There's no investment transfer area. We'll see a lot of that when it comes to the different types of transfers. It's a separate form. And notice that there's a post button. There's no save button. So like I said before, only receipts, as far as cash transactions go, only receipts and payments currently can be saved to a temporary batch mode. This, when you click post, it's going to post and affect your cash immediately. All right, as you can see, there's not a whole lot to this screen. We've got a couple of sections. The first one is the transfer type. And you've got two options. You can transfer from the primary checking account to an investment, or transfer from an investment to the primary checking account. Well, if you're transferring, so those are your two options, and then you'll select the particular investment that you're transferring to or from. And then you've got this warrant field here. Well, what's that about? Well, you're either going to print a warrant when you post this transaction. You'll either print a warrant, handwrite a warrant, which is, this is what the manual warrant option means. So, or the transaction occurred without a warrant being involved. Now we're talking about warrants. We're talking about your primary checking account. That's all UAN basically uses, is when you cut a check, synonym for warrant, it's out of the primary checking. Excuse me. A common mistake that some new fiscal officers will make is that if the investment is at a different bank than their primary checking account bank, what sometimes they'll do is okay, I've got a receipt. They'll receipt the money into the fund, or they've got a cash balance in their checking account, and to get that money to the bank, well, the bank needs a check. So what they'll do is they'll go to their payments, their transactions payments menu, and post a check. And that's a mistake, because when you post a regular payment, you're recording an expenditure. And this is not truly an expenditure. It's all your township's money or entity's money. It's just being moved from one bank account to a different type of bank account. So it's not an expenditure, so you don't want to record a payment to get that money to a different bank. You want to post an investment transfer and print a warrant when you post that investment transfer. And that's what this option is about. So if I click on that checkbox, or that radio button, as we call it, it'll show me the payee, and I can type in the payee, the bank that the check is going to print to, and it'll do two things. It'll move the money from your checking account to your investment account, and it'll produce a warrant that you can take to the bank that you specify. The manual warrant option does the exact same thing. It will print a check when you go to post this transaction. However, it will not, I'm sorry, I said that incorrectly. It will not print a warrant when you post this transaction. A manual warrant will not print a warrant. It will it will record the warrant number. So when we say manual warrant, both here and under payments, it means that you hand wrote the check. You did it outside of the UAN system, and you hand wrote the check on your normal primary checking account checkbook. And now you're just recording that in the UAN. Because if you handwrite a check, UAN does not, there's no way record that you record that check was used in UAN. And so this, will allow you to sync up, so to speak, with your paper checkbook by recording the warrant. I don't recommend using this. If you can avoid this, by all means, avoid handwriting checks out of your checkbook. The reason is that if you don't do things and record payments or transfers like this in the exact order they occurred, you'll get your warrant numbers that, as recorded in UAN, out of sync with the actual paper warrants, and that can be kind of tricky. I'll talk about that a little bit more when we get to payments. But if you can avoid it, don't use that. Don't handwrite the check, and you can avoid that option. But if you do, this is an option for you. It will fill in the, it will record the warrant number is 1015. As long as you post this in the right sequence, it will record that as 1015, and then you can go on with other payments and so forth. Now notice for either of these options, by selecting an investment, like Star Ohio, it'll fill in the payee name for me. There we go, Regional Bank for the money market. And if I had an address, it will do that work for me if I already had that set up in my investment maintenance area for that investment. All right, so these two are for when a warrant is used, whether handwritten or whether you're going to print one right now to take to the bank. Well, what if this all occurs at the same bank? You open up an investment at your at the bank where you hold your primary checking account. Well, then you would choose transfer only, and notice that that whole area disappears. That means it's not, when you post this transaction, it's not going to record a warrant number. It's not going to print a warrant. It'll just print. You'll have an option to print a report it'll show that the transfer occurred. And then at the bank, the same thing happens, something that's electronic. So you'll use this transfer only anytime a warrant from your primary checking account is not involved in the transaction. So that could also be, maybe it is at a different bank, but maybe you use a, what's the word, not a certificate of deposit, I always forget, one of those notes. Well, let's say if it's a wire transfer, and you wire transfer one bank to another, that would be a transfer only, or a cashier's check. That's the word I'm looking for. Use a cashier's check. Well, that doesn't involve a warrant from your bank. If it costs you a little fee for the wire transfer or the cashier's check, you would record that separately under payments. But the actual transfer of the investment amount from the primary checking to your investment would be recorded here in that amount as a transfer only. Notice that if I already have cash, for those investments I already have a cash balance, such as like the money market account here, if I'm going to move money back from my investment account to the primary checking account, my only option is transfer only, because even if that involves a check from some money market checking account or something like that that I have as an investment, in UEN you only have one checkbook. That's your primary checking account. So the recorded here would be recorded as a transfer only. So that's your only option. So we'll go back to our exercise. This is for our Hayes. We're going to get money in our Hayes Bequest investment, and we'll put $9,000 into that. That's exercise number 1. The only exercise we have in this chapter. And before we do this, if you look at your checklist on page 54, one of our recommendations is that you print a fund status report before and after you post this transaction. So that's what I'm going to do. I'll just move this out of the way and go to Reports and Statements, Fund Reports, select all of my funds, fund status, and I'll display that for you on the screen. And we'll look at that before we post this. This is our before. I'd probably print this out and get a red ink pen and mark before investment transfer. All right. Now if we look at our investment transfer form again, our exercise calls for us to transfer from the primary to the investment. And this time we'll say it's the same bank, so it's a transfer only. We'll select our investment. Now notice the drop-down menu. We've got all our investments listed. And we can see from right here that we have a 0 investment balance for Hayes Bequest Fund. And when I select that, 3 fields open up. We've got the amount of the transfer. We know that's going to be $9,000. And then the date of the transfer. Again, I can post date this, or I can forward date or back date this if I need to. I'm going to leave it at today's date. And then we need to pick the fund. Well, remember, we have no money in this investment yet. It's a non-pooled investment. I'm going to enter in the dollar amount again. And so we can, at this point, we can pick the fund for that investment. Even though it's labeled Hayes Bequest Fund, that's just what we labeled, the name. But we haven't actually incorporated the money into that fund yet. So here we can see in our fund 4952 Hayes Bequest, our pooled cash balance is $10,000. That's our receipt we entered into the primary checking account. Well, I'll select that, and so we're going to take the $9,000 from the Hayes Bequest Fund and post it. And we see a little confirmation here. Posted transfer of $9,000 from primary to Hayes. Okay, one thing, well, I should have pointed out, maybe I'll point out in a different example. So now if we posted our transaction. Now this is the report before the transaction was posted. We look at our Hayes Bequest Fund. We have fund balance of $10,000, and all of that is pooled. It's in the checking, it happens to be in the checking account, which is all pooled cash. And nothing in investments, but this is our total of our pooled cash. And it was part of our primary checking account, $510,850. Well, we can see from here that our primary checking account's gone down by $9,000 already to 501. So let's print another fund status. All right, now some things have changed. So after, we can mark on this after, and now we've got a nice record. If you do this immediately before you post it, immediately after you post this investment transfers, you'll have the peace of mind of seeing that you did everything correctly. And if you're, let's say at the end of the month when you're doing your bank reconciliation, you're not in balance, well, you know, as long as you got that before and after, immediately after, you have kind of the peace of mind of knowing that, well, the problem isn't with the investments. You kind of get that backup in printed form for yourself. So here's the Hayes bequest. So we've got our investment non-pooled increased to $9,000, and then our pooled cash decreased to $1,000. And we can see that here. Our primary checking account decreased, and our pooled investment stayed the same because this wasn't a pooled investment. And then our secondary checking account, well, okay, we got a secondary checking account. So our pool, nothing changed with our pooled investments. Our available primary checking account was reduced, and our non-pooled investment increased by $9,000, our total for all of our non-pooled investments. So that's a good report to print before and afterwards. So I'll go back to our post-investment form. Well, there's one thing I forgot to show you about this non-pooled investment. Now we have another non-pooled investment. That's the UN bequest fund. Now notice that, so this is a non-pooled investment. Notice that when I select the fund, now can't show you on this one either. Well, just to have to explain. When we first, let's jump to a different point here. Under the Hayes bequest fund, we can now see that it's got an investment balance of $9,000 right here. Let's say later on I say, well, sure, $9,000 is restricted, and so I'm going to put that in investment, but maybe I'm still not going to spend all that $1,000 this year. Let's put maybe another $500 or $600 into that investment. Well, I can do that. Set the date and select the fund. Well, now I've only got one option, right? I've got pool balance remaining of $1,000, and it's only showing the Hayes bequest fund. Well, why is it only showing me this one fund at this time? It's because once I've established the cash balance for that fund, that's it. Because it's non-pooled, remember the definition, it could only, a non-pooled investment can only have cash from one fund. It's designated. It's not pooled with cash from all funds. So from now on, if I do a transfer to or from the investment, it's going to be to or from the investment balance of this permanent fund, the Hayes bequest. One thing I failed to show you when we first established this investment, as I said, I misspoke and said that it was showing you all of the funds that you could transfer from, and that wasn't true. We were actually missing the Road and Bridge Fund and a few others, and the reason we were missing those funds is because in the fund maintenance section, it did not, those funds are not marked as, well, I can go here real quick under maintenance funds. We look at, for instance, Road and Bridge, but per the chart of accounts, the Road and Bridge Fund cannot receive its own interest, and therefore it can never meet the definition of a fund that can be invested in a non-pooled investment. So that wasn't even an option for our non-pooled investment Hayes bequest fund there. Let me see if I get back to that screen. Okay, so that's a non-pooled investment. Well, what does it look like if you were to transfer money from a, just reset the screen here, transfer money from a your primary checking account to a pooled investment. So remember, if I get out of here, remember under our investment screen we got a couple of pooled investments here, Star Ohio and the money market fund. Those are both multi-funds pooled. And notice there's no funds listed here. Well, if I go back to where it is, go to Post My Investment, and I select the money market fund, it's got a $5,000 balance. Notice there's no fund to pick from. It's just a matter of, hey, if I want to increase the money market fund to from 5,000 to 15,000, I just transfer 10,000. Now I've got to have enough money in my available checking account balance. If I look at the fund status, if I don't have enough money in my available primary checking account balance, I'm not going to be able to transfer that over to the pooled investments. So in other words, I cannot transfer, if I try to transfer $502,000, $500 or $510,000 or whatever, more than this 501, excuse me, I'm going to get an error message. It's not going to allow me to do that. I can't exceed this primary checking. I've got to, that's all I have. I would have to find some other option for that investment. So it's pooled cash, and I can transfer it. If I were to transfer this, it's not going to affect my any of these amounts in my funds. These would all remain the same. And this checking pooled investments would all remain the same, this total. The only thing that would change on this report is that my pooled investments would increase. So let's say if I transfer $5,000 from the money market to, well, I could show you real quick. Close down some of this. I transfer 5,000, which I have currently 5,000 in there. Transfer maybe another 10,000 in there, and post it. And then look at my fund status. I can see that nothing here has changed. All these amounts are identical. I didn't get any more cash. I just moved it here between my checking account, that decreased, and my pooled investments increased by $10,000. Later on I say, well, I need some more money in that money market account, or in my checking account. If I record an investment to primary, it's a money market of $10,000. And post it. Well, when I close the screen, it's going to say, do I want to print a transfer report? That's a good idea. We'll say no for our class. And then I go and look at the fund status again. We can see again, the only thing that changed is this pooled investment column, or it reduced the pooled investments and increased my available primary checking balance. Okay, so that's all I have for investment transfers. The next session is on payments.